Welcome to Fosbury Flop, a podcast for the crazy ones who are not fond of rules. A podcast about the geniuses who change the world. James Vaughan is one of those thinkers who you first label as utopian. Then you start to think about what he's saying. And finally, you prove him right. He's a researcher and football coach at IKE Stockholm. In his PhD, papers and articles, he explains how culture impacts how we are, how we play, and how it develops or kills the creativity of our players. His wisdom gives us hope to find some light in such a great future. James, thank you very much for coming to Fosbury Flop. I met you in Kisakallio. Then I keep knowing about you through all your papers and articles. And two of them that opened completely my eyes and I loved was first the misguided praise Yankees, highlighting a little bit how cultures influence our players and their development. And then as a Catalan, I loved all your work related to Barça, FC Barcelona, the Catalan culture, and so on. So, but you are, if I'm not wrong, from New Zealand?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for inviting me on, and I'm pleased you've enjoyed some of the articles that are out there. I am originally from the UK, so I grew up in England, and was involved in like kind of the first football academy setups there. But then when I was 15, I was released after an injury and moved to New Zealand. So from 16 to 25, I was in New Zealand.
You are from UK, you go to New Zealand.
Yeah.
Now you are coaching in Sweden, but what brings you to Barcelona?
Yeah, well, when I was in New Zealand, I actually started I started coaching as a player coach. I think I might have been 20, around about 2021, when the university football team, I was at Otago University, and they ran out of money. So the best way to save money was to not hire a coach. So me and actually a couple of friends kind of just put our hands up and said, well, look, we can try and do this thing. And that's where my coaching journey started. And then after working in actually senior football very early on, I realized I needed to go and learn more about coaching. So I actually started a master's with the University of Queensland, which was initially like online by distance. And then I moved to a master's whereby I was studying a team in Melbourne. And so I was following a team over the course of a year and trying to understand how, well, really the relationship between self-determination theory and creativity. And after doing that, so like understanding players, like perceptions of autonomy, competence, and relatedness, after that, really everything boiled down to cultural values and what really defined autonomy, competence, and relatedness in many ways was the cultural context and how the culture kind of set the foundation for those things. So then, after finishing my master's, I had the opportunity to apply for a PhD at University of Queensland. And that was like where I was in my time of life, and being in Australia and New Zealand, the best pathway for me to continue developing as a coach was to stay in the academic path. And so I designed my PhD study to do different cultural case studies to look at how creativity was influenced by culture, and using football as the kind of context to understand that. And that took me to Barcelona. That was the place I wanted to go. So you could say I designed my PhD to get myself to Barcelona. That's one way of putting it. But I think it was also just a fascinating case study in general. It was just on the back of Pep Guardiola being there. I think it was Luis Enrique and Suarez and Messi and Neymar at the top, and you still had Iniesta there and Busquets, and that kind of the end of the glory days, if you like. So it was almost like a bit of a mecca to go to Barcelona and understand how player development took place and how culture influenced that, and whether it made made it, whether it was conducive to creativity or whether it was stifling, and to try and understand the tensions and the dynamics at play.
Because can you explain a bit more what was a little bit the main link between your PhD and your experience in Barcelona?
Yeah, but that's I suppose.
Or maybe it was just the excuse.
No. Well, it was going. It was in many ways looking at the football that was being played in Barcelona, and the creative expression of players like Messi and Iniesta and Suarez and Neymar, and going, and then also being aware of the history in Barcelona, back as far as Rinus Michels and Cruyff, and going like, well, what is happening in this place that is allowing this way of football to flourish? Because at that time, like the what's now considered the positional game, it wasn't as widespread at all, and it really was Barcelona back in kind of 2008 with Pep, and then Spain in 2010, and then it was becoming more popular and spreading around the world. So I think part of that was a big part of me wanting to go there, as well as just the best team was there, the best players were there, like and then I suppose there was also the Catalan side of things. So, but to be honest, Marty, I'm not sure how much I actually can't remember how much of that I knew before I went to Barcelona. I was definitely aware of that Barcelona and Catalonia Catalonia was different from Spain, but I wasn't aware of the magnitude of that difference and the history that comes with that.
I feel like, James, that you know much more about Barcelona, Catalonia, and all its culture that many Catalan people. Maybe I would include myself also. But
that's very nice of you to say, and I suppose that just maybe I did an okay job with my PhD study. That must be that's what it's down to, I suppose.
I remember like a moment kind of like enlightening when I was reading about the Gothic cathedral in the center of Barcelona, in which you were exposing that just the Catalan culture, it was a little bit the mindset like by the people, for the people.
Yeah.
And that's why they wanted to do it. Well, maybe you can explain it better, the story in which between you link the cathedral and the Barça game style.
Yeah. So this is me repeating the stories that are told in the city, and an understanding of the artifacts and the histories. So what I understood through my research was that a key difference between Catalonia and the rest of Europe is the layout and the design then, and the architecture of like the Gothic churches. Being that in the majority of Europe, it's they are lined up like a cross, and the hallways are quite narrow basically. So you've got the altar in the middle, you got a cross shape, and it's narrow. So with it being narrow, you had certain people sitting at the front and certain people sitting at the back, certain people sitting off on the wings. And that ended up in many ways being a class thing, being the richer at the front, the poor at the back, or the nobles at the front, the poor at the back, that kind of dynamic. Whereas in Catalonia, the Gothic churches were built to be as wide as possible. So most of them, if not all of them, don't have a cross structure at all. And they're super wide. And they actually had to develop special engineering, ways of engineering, like shallow roofs that could hold a lot of weight to be able to actually expand and have that big space. And the idea being just that you can get more people in the same space, and that there's less, it's more egalitarian, or there's more equality in where people are seated and how people have access to the space, and those kind of ideas. And that then becomes so, in some of the things I've read and some of the stories that I was aware of, it became clear that this was talked about as Catalans having a passion for width, because the width gives you space, it gives you room for more people to share that space. And then you watch Barcelona play, and traditionally utilizing the width of the pitch was something that they was a very clear expression of this positional game, and sharing the ball and having a possession-based game, and particularly a possession-based game whereby the ball is moved around from one side of the pitch to the other side of the pitch. It was a kind of recognition that just emerged in the data that I was collecting and in the analysis I was doing, and to me, at least, it seemed like there was a clear connection, albeit over, if you like, hundreds of years, from when these churches were designed to the expression of football we see today. It's recognizing that there's a red thread, and that red thread is this value in having a more fair and equal, egalitarian kind of society. And that then is expressed or manifests in lots of different ways within the culture. So in the churches and on the football pitch.
Yeah.
And in lots of other places as well.
I remember it a lot that first, when you read that, there is like a little bit a surprise, no? How can be that this church is connected to football? Yeah. But then I just remember one moment in the first Champions League final that with Guardiola we were playing, in which I think Pedro was in the side, I think it was left wing maybe, and the ball was in the other side of the court, and he was completely connected or almost touching the line, keeping the space super wide. And what he was doing was that one of the I don't know which was the defender of Manchester United that had to stay with him very close. And then and then you see this first connection, like, okay, maybe that's right. But then it also came to my mind that I think in Spain, the biggest, for example, in Catalonia, many people in the dictatorship and many other times, people from other parts of Spain has came here. Or if you see, for example, elections results, as everywhere, like the extreme right, for example, is increasing, but the pattern in Catalonia, it's quite different to many places in which is growing more. And it's very curious because from that first thought, like, how can this be real? Then you start seeing facts of the culture and you say like, okay, maybe it's right, no? And it's completely very interesting.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, I can remember being in Denmark and making these points and doing a presentation and talking about the style of play and the Gothic churches. And I remember one of the audience or one of the coaches kind of walking off at the end, just like, there's no way, I'm not having that. Like, I'm not having I'm not having that these Gothic churches are connected to this way of playing football. And I can understand that. And it's important to recognize that we're not saying that this is a correlation. It's not A equals B. It's recognizing that there's a social and cultural context. And from that, you have different emergent features. And sport is just an emergent feature. And that's why football is so interesting, because it is played in all these different cultural contexts. And then the style of play that emerges from the cultural context will tell you something about that cultural context. And then if you're studying aspects of the cultural context, there are other emergent features of that as well, like the architecture. So it's not that anyone has purposefully gone, tell you what, we really value equality, and we like to express that in the width of our churches. So when we play football, let's be really
It's
wide
like
in what we do.
the mindset behind, no,
Yeah,
of the
it's
Catalan culture, not the
exactly.
church itself.
Exactly. So it's the values that underpin it, and it's this intentionality that exists within the system. So it's not something that exists in any person's mind as such. It's a relationship between the people and the culture and the place. And again, that's a difficult perspective for many to get our heads around, because it's not a Western worldview as such. It's a worldview that is a lot more relational, and it's a worldview that is that doesn't always sit right with the history of certainly, I would say, Northern European cultures in particular. I would say it's a little bit more black and white thinking.
Yeah, I agree. Like, but now, for example, not thinking, I love my dad, but my dad, for example, reading my thesis about complex systems and paddle coaching, always has said to me, like, yeah, Martí, that's very beautiful, but that's not real. You cannot coach like that. So James, how would you describe to my dad how where you live can impact how you play?
Well, it's interesting, because I think I think people know that. I think people intuitively understand this, but they understand it at an intuitive level, rather than at like a rational or intellectual level. And the classic example is something my dad would talk about, and the idea that, like, so he was from Liverpool, and people would always like, and so in Liverpool you're kind of called a Scouser, and you're it carries kind of like certain characteristics and certain stereotypes and things like that. But what people would say is, you can take the boy out of Liverpool, but you can't take the Liverpool out of the boy.
I love this sentence.
Yeah, which is really like really a deep recognition of how place shapes us and how our culture shapes us. So I think people understand that at that intuitive level, but we haven't necessarily had the science and the methodological tools to really shine a light on that. So when people want to be rational or more objective and more scientific, then it's almost like that intuition, that embedded knowledge, they have to put that to one side, and then they go, yeah, but Marty, how do you prove that to me? Which becomes a question of knowledge and epistemology and ontology, and unfortunately that is a place where it's difficult to have those conversations, because you really are asking people to challenge their view of the world, and that's quite a fundamental challenge and a fundamental change. But I think we can always help people by bringing them back to examples, and bringing them back to that knowledge that's more intuitive. Like, yeah, well, you take the boy out of Liverpool, but not the Liverpool out of the boy. Like it's essentially that.
I think it's I would say that you would maybe think a little bit like me, that it's very easy to feel if you have been in different cultures, but a little bit hard to explain. For example, me as a basketball coach, I saw that the warm-up and many drills, or many even ways of talking that I was using in Barcelona, I couldn't use in Finland. And a little bit the same as what players ask me or how players play paddle. Yeah. And that's the tricky point, no? I would say that you have been all over the world, can you see it? But in the fact of explaining, this way is not so easy.
I completely agree. And for me, that was moving from the UK to New Zealand at 15 years old. But it was like that planted a seed of like, well, why the hell is everything? Why this place is so similar, but it's so different? Like, why? And like for me, it was, why is rugby the national sport over here? Like, why and why is it football? And those, but those, it was planting a seed. Those questions were kind of, it wasn't even that I asked those questions initially, but they almost grew inside of me, like over a number of years, to the point whereby at university, lecturers and professors were asking those same questions. And then it was like, okay, well, this is actually like a legitimate question, and people have some like insight into why that might be. And that's what's really fascinated me in relation to football, and that's why I ended up in Barcelona. And I think, yeah, my dad and I have always been fascinated with Brazilian football as well. And a big part of that will be that Dad actually saw Pele play in the '66 World Cup in England at Goodison Park in Liverpool, and like, I think at that point in time, you know, seeing the Brazilian team play as I mean, if you can imagine, like, no TV, no internet, and it's just a real once in a lifetime type thing. And so he'd always been very interested in the way they play, and the beautiful game, and where that comes from as well. And obviously there's some good research out there that's actually gone and looked at Brazil in particular, which is and football, which is very interesting stuff.
I think here it would be very interesting that you explain also, because you have found also, like, in Brazil they have skills, moves that you only see in Brazil, and I don't think that it's just randomness, and it's something also you have been, I think, mentioning.
Yeah totally. I mean, it is, again, I think that's where you look through the lens of like a constraints-led approach, and you look through the lens of ecological dynamics, and recognizing that skills develop in relation to the environment that you're in. Then it's actually kind of not too difficult to well, again, depends on how you see the world, right? But to see, like, if we just kind of give an umbrella term of street football, and we recognize that most players in Brazil grow up with street football, and then so being skillful in small spaces, it becomes kind of obvious that's where they spend a lot of their time. But then you have the cultural influences of samba and capoeira, and the cultural kind of identity or idea of ginga. And before you know it, you've got this perfect storm of if you want to call them kind of movement cultures that overlap and infuse each other. And you get this very unique expression in football. And there's some really wonderful work out there by a researcher called Luis Ibarra. And I apologize every time I try and say his last name. It's slightly different.
We will put the work in the notes of the episode.
We'll put some links to his work. Yeah. And it's funny enough, Luis was at Otago University when I was there. So he was doing his PhD when I was an undergrad. There's been some really good people there that kind of almost the front runners of some of this stuff.
But I think this example of Brazil shows a little bit how this culture at the end shapes how you play and who you are. No, like at the end, street football is played all over South America, and I think we have a lot to learn from that. But those kind of movements, their style, above all, you find it in Brazil.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a really interesting, it's a very interesting time in football in general at the moment, and this is really coming from Brazil with the ideas of relationism. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. It's kind of an idea that has been proposed as in many ways as something distinct and counter to like traditional positional play. So I think it's really actually interesting here that we have we have coming from Barcelona, if you like, with Rinus Michels and with Cruyff and with Pep, and the tradition of like the positional game being there, and that being kind of in many ways highly structured. But also, at least my interpretation has been there is structure, but there's always been space for creativity for those players that have the ability to accept that space and are skillful enough to utilize it, which is very interesting. But then in Brazil now you have like the counter to that, which is this idea of relationism, which is much more, rather than like equally sharing the space on the pitch, you orientate yourself and move based on the positions of your teammates and obviously the opposition. But there's not the same imperative to use the full width of the pitch. Like if all 8 players can be on one side of the pitch and be in positions to receive the ball and move the ball forward to create opportunities, then yeah, why not? And I was actually discussing this with a friend of mine recently, and I think that again is so suited to the Brazilian player. And in many ways, like Fluminense and the coach Dines, there are the forerunners or the kind of creators of this new wave and this idea of relationism. But what's super interesting is when you hear the coach talk of Fluminense, what he talks about is his players. And he talks about meeting their needs in many ways and respecting that they have a way of wanting to play the game. They have a way of bringing themselves and expressing themselves in football. And so in many ways, this way of playing is an expression of those players. So I think it's a wonderful example of a style of play emerging with and co-created with the players from a specific cultural context. And Barcelona was the same. I truly believe the positional game resonated with the Catalan culture in a number of different ways, in that it was uniquely different from anywhere else. So this sense of like self-determination, doing things differently, I think allowed Michels and then Cruyff to be accepted and for people to really want to play in this new way. And as we've discussed already, there was serious overlap with Catalan values in terms of sharing the space equally and seeing that expressed in the way football is played. So what you get there is 2 styles of football that are quite different, but when they're aligned with the cultural context and when the players are able to express who they are or who they feel they are and what they value, you get really high levels of performance. I think what has happened with the debate around relationism and positionism at the moment is that the Barcelona's, if you like, way of playing, the positional game has been exported and imposed by many coaches in cultures whereby it doesn't align with the players' self-expression. And so you have to enforce that way of playing on players. And what you get is very docile players who just do what they're told rather than go and express themselves on the pitch. So I think that's a wrinkle actually in this whole debate, which maybe we don't shine enough of a light on that.
The philosopher Nassim Taleb explains about iatrogenics, no? That is the harm caused when you intervene a system that would heal itself, no? And he puts the example, for example, of United States, that more people is dead about opioids than of car accidents, no? Because at the small pain, the doctor gives medicine and then they mix with alcohol or whatever and they have car accidents. When probably if we could tolerate better or whatever, it wouldn't be needed to intervene the system. But I relate completely this topic to, for example, to what you were saying of Fluminense or of our role as coach to just let the players express. Because I think that many times with talent or with players, the only need that coaches need to do is don't destroy things. Just try to go with them. And this obsession of over, like intervene, continue, control, at the end is completely, it's constraining that fact.
Yeah, and I think there's obviously there's two sides of a spectrum there as well, in that too much freedom and too much choice can also lead to a kind of paralysis, which is where like the constraints led approach and like in a more kind of ecological view becomes really helpful, because it's not just like let the kids play or let the players play in its complete freedom. It is skillfully designed sessions which constrain and constrain in a way that afford certain opportunities and certain solutions to emerge, and certain then skills related to those solutions. So it is I think drawing the solutions out of the players, so they are expressing themselves to solve like the challenge in front of them, rather than having to kind of ABCD it. And that I think is that's the art of coaching. That's
kind of
where
to manage this spectrum, no, between over constraining or not constraining at all.
Yeah, because I also think this is like, this is a little bit, this is not necessarily, this is something that like flirts around the edges of the research that I've done, but I think the focus on the individual, and even the word individual, the amount we talk about individuals is strange in comparison to, say, people or person. Like so I think that's kind of like an interesting wrinkle. And connected to that, there's a lot of research around autonomy, which is about then the individual choice, or at least autonomy has been very much interpreted and maybe kind of politically almost like taken to be like personal choice, because that fits with like a free market ideology, right? And neoliberalism and capitalism and all those type of things. So I think that research and that emphasis like almost bleeds down into coaching practice, because everything does, it cascades down. And so we have a situation whereby there has been a thought that a constraints-led approach or a teaching games for understanding is like hands off, like you don't say anything, you don't do anything, because autonomy is choice. But I would argue autonomy is not that is one aspect of autonomy, but an arguably a more important aspect is being able to express what you value. So like that becomes, then you can design that into training sessions, you can design that into the way the team plays. You can very simply ask the players what they enjoy most about playing the game, and you can start from there. But it's certainly not a hands-off. Autonomy is just the most choice you can possibly have. That can lead to paralysis, and that can lead to just like a deer in the headlights. Like there's no constraints. I could do anything here, so I do nothing.
It's like autonomy is the fact to achieve, no? Like the coach can constrain, put conditions to explore, no? Yeah. That the players explores differently, and then they can achieve autonomy.
Exactly. That's it. They have,
Because James, I'm sure that for all that I read and seen, you try to apply all this to your teams. But for example, in your context, in which I guess that you are in a quite professional, I don't know how would say, high performance academy, how do this translate to your coaching practices?
It's a very good, it's a really good question. If we can there was just one line of thought before I come back to this one, because I think it might provide a clear example of what we've just been discussing in relation to a coach's approach and the way you set up a team, allowing them to express themselves versus like not allowing to express themselves, and then how that might influence autonomy and then the performance in general. And like Argentina at the World Cup is a good example of this. I think it's been pretty well documented in different articles that they I think it was the Saudi Arabia game whereby they ended up drawing. I think it was 2-2, or did they lose 2-1? They lost that game, I think, didn't they?
I don't remember.
It wasn't a good performance anyway. But when you look at that, they played more of a positional style, like a positional game. It was the high and wide. It was the players playing in different positions, which there's nothing wrong with that, given that that's something that the players want to express and that it fits with the broader context. But then in the following games, they moved to what would be considered more of a relational style, whereby it was less about people being in positions and more about people being close to each other and being able to connect with each other, being able to interact. And from there, that has been what has been said, is that represents the kind of historical way of playing in Argentina that allowed the players to express who they are as these players that come from the street, as these players that have played in these small spaces, or just really what bubbles up from the Argentinian culture. And there, obviously, they kicked on and they did very well, and they end up winning the World Cup. So I think it's a very clear example of how you can impose a way of playing on a certain group of players that, for whatever reason, doesn't really allow them to express themselves or express their culture or express what they value. And therefore, you're never going to get like the best performance out of that group if they don't feel like they're expressing who they are as a team and who they are as players. So then if I jump back to the question around how we work, there is what I encourage a lot of our coaches to do is to go on a journey with their players and with their team, which is open and starts with what do you enjoy about football, or what do you love most about football, or who are the players that you love watching the most, who are the teams that you enjoy watching the most, what is it that they do that you really enjoy, what is it that gets you up off your seat. From those players, who would you like to play like? What aspects, what strengths do they have that you have? What things did they have that you don't, but you'd like to have, areas we'd like to improve? So really trying to using the game and the way players and teams play the game to help them express themselves and express who they are as a group and who they are as individuals. And I think there are many benefits to this, many ripples on the water. And I think
because once you know more or less like who do they want to play, which styles they like, then is it your work to try to adapt? I guess that you also have to constrain a bit in order that everybody can express.
Yep, it is. Then it is the most complex dance. As you know, with coaching, it is, it's crazy. It's a crazy complex dance because there's so many other constraints based on who's available this game, who are the opposition, who where are people at in terms of fitness, and there's just all these other considerations. But I think the value that what can happen is that when we put a player in a situation going into a game, we have a clear idea of what they want to do and how they like to do it, and whether that fits well with this game, and we can put them in a position whereby it might fit the best, maybe. But also just having the conversation. So just really like the players getting to tell you, as the coach, what they love about football, and you as the coach sitting there and just listening and being genuinely interested. I mean, I think that's massive for most players. to kind of have that. And then as a coach, if you can reference some of the things that you've talked about in training sessions, or in relation to games, it's very clear then for the players that, like, in their words, using their role models, you're able to go, yeah, well, this is a great opportunity to play like this today. Or I can see you having loads of opportunities to do this thing that is a real strength of yours. Or today is an opportunity to explore doing this, which I know is something you want to improve.
And I see, a little bit that what is very interesting that at the moment that I am asking you how you put this into practice, you are talking about the players, like, okay, the players first, no? But then I have, and I really like a lot the point that you said that they can talk. I think usually it has been seen like, hey, no, the coach talks and the player says, okay, I will do it, which this is, I think, a very powerful change of mindset. But now it came to my mind, I think it's Joan Vilà sentence that says FC Barcelona doesn't have the idea, has one idea and wants to share it. And I would say, for what we have been talking a little bit your career, that you have had a lot of influence and you like this idea of FC Barcelona. So which role does it play, your thoughts, your preferences in the moment of coaching? Like, you want that your team plays in a way you like, you are more at their service, it's a 50-50?
Okay, yeah, I see. This is a really interesting one. I think because of how I honestly, because of the way football has been globalized, because of the internet, because of all the different football you can watch and you can see, I think if you ask most teams in most like at least kind of, I suppose, countries that are similar to Spain, to Sweden, to Germany, to you're going to get them, the answers to who do you want to play like are going to end up being related to the most successful teams. So in the last couple of years, when you ask this question, like even here in Sweden, like predominantly the answers circle around a Liverpool and a Man City. We want to defend like Liverpool. We want to be like Man City when we have the ball. So for me, what the answers to the question you're getting, there's never been any conflict with me going, nah, I don't want my teams to play like that. Like,
no, that's really nice.
Like if a team came and said, like, okay, we want to play like Stoke back in the early 2000s, we want to launch the long throws, we want to
then you quit.
Then honestly you could go, well, all right, maybe I'm not the right coach for this team, or maybe I'm not the right coach for this group of players, but I've never had that. But even if that was the case, for me what becomes most exciting is, okay, fine, that's how you want to play, how do we get there? How do we get really good at that? If that's what you want to be really good at, how do we do that? Based on like the group of players that we have, based on the type of opposition, based on the culture that we're in, based on the facilities and the resources that we have. And then for me, that's the exciting part is, well, what do we do on the grass? And then trying to get there through an ecological lens, an ecological way of working. So yeah, ecological dynamics, constraint-set approach, what we would talk about as like shaping skilled intentions using the foundations of task design model. So yeah, I think that the journey of getting there is interesting. And what I truly believe is, if the way you're working, if you're working in a way that, if you're working from this perspective, that it's the relations between players, it's shared affordances, it's being really well attuned to the movement of teammates and opposition, like no matter what the style of players that you're ending up towards, you're going to develop skilled players and skilled relations within a team And then what you're going to get is little moments of creativity. Even if we're hoofing the ball long, there'll be moments whereby they're looking for the long ball and they see the strikers running to just come and block it, and they shape it and they cut inside and they dribble and they do something else. Because the context in which you would train, you would always be offering more than one option. And you'd be going, yeah, okay, we can play over, but we want to be able to play over. Like, it's helpful if we can play around, because then the defense can't just drop, or we want to play through, so we keep the defensive line higher, so it's easier to play over. So when you
James, sorry, I found in Kisacalio, in your presentation, very interesting, this concept of play around, play over. Could you summarize it a little bit for all the listeners? In which is based?
Yeah, so this is recognizing that when we're looking at a team sport and an invasion sport in particular, you're looking at like complex adaptive systems. So you're looking at one opposition adapting to another opposition, and mostly one opposition that has the ball, and a team that wants to get the ball or wants to stop that other team getting into a goal. So they're constantly adapting to each other, right? And in most invasion games, you need to get behind a number of opposition players to be able to then score a goal or get close enough to the goal. And then very simply, to get behind the opposition, given the dynamics of the game and the laws of physics and all that kind of stuff, you can play around the opposition, you can play through the opposition lines, or you can play over the opposition. And what is key for me is that these are intentions. They're skilled intentions that shape intentionality in the game. And intentionality is this.
What do you mean? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, it's this directedness that we experience towards the environment. So it's the intentionality that shines a light on some aspects of the environment, and therefore some affordances that stand out rather than others. So there's like a value directedness to it. So I would say in Barcelona, you're value directed players to adopt wide spaces and recognize the width of the pitch. And therefore the opportunity, we shine a light on the opportunity to pass out wide, the shared affordance to play out wide. That becomes something that, because of the broader intentionality, which directs attention in the game, that affordance becomes something we utilize. We develop skills to utilize it. And it's like, it's something that becomes kind of ingrained. And so
it would be like the players' intentions are educated in order to go over, go through, or
and the reason, again, we're talking about intentions and intentionality rather than principles, is that intentionality is this relationship between like aspects of the environment. So there is no inner corridor when we see the game and we see the pitch. There's opposition and there's teammates, and yes, there are some lines on a pitch, but there's no line for an inner corridor. There's no switch of play actually in the pitch. There's nothing there. It's just a concept that has to, stay in here, and you have to kind of represent it in the game. But there are opposition to play around. There are opposition to play through, and there are opposition to play over. And what's really important is this is a relational concept in itself, in that as we start to play around, the opposition, if they don't adapt, then we can continue to play around, but most will. And when you adapt to stop the team playing around, then you open up opportunities to play through. When you start to play through in between lines, then people have to step up to try and win the ball, which means then you have the opportunity to play over. But that's not ABC either. That's like, it can be round the other way as well. You have runs to go over, which means you have more space between the lines, so you can play through. Or you play through, which means they get more compact, so you can play around. So it's just recognizing that these intentions, they sit together. And the most skilled players and skilled teams are the ones that hold these intentions in the same space simultaneously. So as I am looking to play around, I am also trying to be aware of if an opportunity to play through opens up, and be aware of, is there an opportunity to play over? So it's about educating players' attention, but doing that through their intentions. So what are they trying to do? And linking their intentions always to real things in the game. So what we say, environmental properties in the game, and the dynamic properties, most importantly, because the better attuned we are to the movements of opposition and teammates and the ball and the area on the pitch and proximity to the goal, then the more attuned we are, the more skillful we become at looking around and playing through and driving through and then playing over and being able to skillfully juggle all these intentions, which then develop skill sets that allow us to adapt from one thing to another. And I would say then you get these markers of skilled intentionality, which for me is any moment that a defender or an opposition team or line moves away, almost like moves away from where the ball is being taken. Or so traditionally, like in a pass fake or like a feint or a step over, the defender steps in the wrong way and you take the ball the other way. But it can be that you look to play the ball over, the whole back line drops, and then you hit a flat ball in front to a player that's just standing in front now. So anytime that opposition players are deceived and they move in the wrong direction, then you've got a moment of a marker of skilled intentionality, and there for me that's a creative moment in invasion sports, in team sports.
That's what I was going to say. That no, I think this, I don't know if you agree, it would be a nice example to show what we were talking about, that creativity, foster creativity, is not just say, okay, I let you alone and create, but kind of the spectrum that we were saying before. Here is not free play, is not over constraining on what to do, but setting out, educate this intention, no? And then in order to make these three concepts, they have enough spaces, enough different opportunities to make this creativity.
Yeah, totally. And in many session designs, you can take away. Many session designs don't have over, for example. And then you can design other sessions whereby you're really shining a light on the opportunities to play around, by making sure the defenders are covering through, or the other way around. So it becomes using this lens and using the foundations of task design model as well. It's like, for me, it's like having a compass. So it provides like the foundations of task design model and shaping skilled intentions as ideas. It's like having, I have a compass, two compass, if you like. They're going to help me skillfully navigate the complexity that is coaching, the complexity of invasion games. And then for the players as well, you're going, well, through, round and over, actually, this is a compass that you can take with you. And that's going to help you skillfully navigate every moment of the game. So those intentions live and breathe in every moment. When we have the ball, we're always looking for what's the best option. Is it through? Is it round and over? And where I am in relation to the ball, should I be through, around, or over? And then when we don't have the ball, can we stop them playing through, around, and over as we win the ball? That's the key. We don't want the ball going behind us when we want to try and win it. And where am I on the pitch? Again, well, I'm in a position where I need to stop them going around there. I'm in a position where I need to stop them going through there, but I'm close enough I can go and try and win the ball as well. And even though I'm verbally explaining all of this, the idea with these intentions is that, and this directedness towards the environment, is that you're able to act really quickly based on it, because you're not verbalizing anything in your mind. You're not having to recall something that you saw on the whiteboard written up by the coach, or like a concept that doesn't exist in the game. You are attuned to and immersed in the game, and you have these intentions, like this elegant simplicity at the other end of all the game's complexity, these intentions that you share with your teammates, which help you coordinate yourselves together. And then when you have the ball, they allow you to like express yourself, but also juggle through. I'm looking around, I'm looking through, I'm looking over, and I'm developing skills to be able to do all those things as I go through. So yeah, hopefully that makes some sense to people.
I think that completely what I see a little bit in these methods is that, and I would say like it keeps the essence of the game, like the essence of football, the nature. At the moment that when we start ordering verbally, the players have to behave because what the coach says, maybe the task, it doesn't keep this essence, this opposition, the real situations. So most all of your tasks, many keep a little bit this, I would say, nature of football. I don't know how to describe it, no? But this.
Yeah, well, we would say like making sure that it's a representative design, so that the movements, the movements of opposition and teammates and the gaps and spaces that open up are representative of the game. But then you have also you have a wrinkle in that whereby you might not want them to be representative of the game or you might want it to be more complex than the game to like really push some kind of skill development. I think this is where you've got some really interesting work by Fabian Otto, who's looking at the periodization of skill training, the post framework, which is really nice at recognizing that you have representativeness, and then you can have what is less representative, and then it's going to be less representative and less complex, which is where we're moving to more isolated. But then you have less representative but more complex. So there's more complexity. There can be more complexity in training design than there is in the actual game. So it's less representative but with more complexity. The idea is that you hopefully get more skill adaptations, and that can be advantageous in certain phases of acquiring or developing skills, which is all outlined in a couple of different papers that Fabian's done.
Very interesting. For me, the main point for people is that I think you don't try to change the game, make your style or your own game, but just respecting the game. See, okay, how let's solve these issues.
Yeah, totally. That's such a good way of putting it. If as you say, if we respect the essence of the game, so the reality of what the game is, and we try and coach from there, and then respect the way the players want to express themselves in the game. It's kind of two key points, key overlaps.
Now I have to ask you, in your article, Misguided Praise Yankees, you exposed how the social approval from your parents, from the coach, according to the social norms of UK at that time, shaped a little bit how you were, no? Yeah. How you played. And for me, it was surprisingly that you closed the article saying that you wouldn't sign again if you could make the choice for the Nats center of academy.
Yeah.
And it's quite surprising, not that at the end a kid in one of the best academies in the football place as UK would say that. So do you feel the coach, or kind of that you would like to have had in Notts Academy?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a really good question. I mean, I think it comes back to something you said earlier, which is, and something that's been said in I think Mark O'Sullivan's mentioned this in a couple of different occasions, but like, if you're going to step into the learning process, or if you're going to step in as a coach, then you better be sure that you're adding value. And the flip side of that is you better be sure that you're not, as you've mentioned, killing creativity or stepping on players' toes or whatever they want to do. So the question of whether I would be the coach today that I would have wanted then, I don't know. I don't think I would be, because I was a little praise junkie. I wanted someone who was telling me I was good all the time, and was would in many ways tell me what to do. I would go and do it. and I would feel good about myself at the end of the day and could go home. So, but that for me that's developing dependence on other people's kind of thoughts and ideas, and your own self-worth being very much defined by what other people say about what you do, which I don't think is healthy in many or any areas of life. So I think I would be the coach now that I think I needed back then.
That's nice.
Hopefully, but probably not the coach that I really wanted.
Yeah.
And I think that's very difficult in working in team sports as well, because you're always going to have players that want certain things from a coach, and the quick success, the quick fix is to give them that, praise, is to give them that recognition, is to tell them that they are fantastic and that they're the center of the universe, because in that moment everyone feels better, but long term.
Yes, but the same with tasks, maybe a coach might have a more complex methodology, more teaching aids for understanding, or constraint-led approach. But this doesn't mean that maybe the week that they just have lost, he makes more like analytical or isolated drills just for the fact of looking more confident or whatever it is.
Yeah.
The problem is that is the common.
Yeah, no, that's a very good way of putting it. Yeah, it's a very good way of putting it. And I know there's a good friend of mine in Stockholm here who's a goalkeeper coach, also from Catalonia, and he talks about similar experiences working with goalkeepers. That, I mean, he takes a very ecological approach, wants to have as many complex training sessions as he can, but recognizes that, there are times the goalkeepers just want to have the ball kicked at them and they want to catch it and throw it back, even though it's not very representative of the game. It is something that helps for their confidence. And I think that's a really important point, that many players, many professionals, many coaches will do certain exercises and even what might look like drills or are drills for confidence. And I think it's important to make that distinction, that you can do something to make you feel good and to be more confident, but that doesn't mean that it's helping you learn. And there's a bit of a distinction between the two there. And many people that want, if you take professionals that want to just get a bag of balls and kick, 50 balls in the goal on a Friday before the game on the Saturday, well, they're not a professional because they kick 50 balls into the goal and they've done that since they're 12 years old. No. They've developed all sorts of skills. And then the last cherry on top of the cake, before the game on the weekend, is they want to knock some balls in so they can feel confident.
Yes.
And that's fine. And I think that's where, when we come to youth sport, though, we always have to consider biggest bang for our buck. We don't have the time professionals have. So do we have time to do sessions that are isolated, that are drills, to just do confidence training? Not really. We need to be focusing on more complex environments, more complex things, whereby their players are learning and they're pushed to learn. And what they learn to value over the course of that is the challenge. They learn to value and appreciate and want to be challenged.
Here it's and this is personal experience, but what I have seen, I don't know if you agree, is that challenge is the most powerful, or one of the most powerful, in order to make the team go out of the comfort zone, try, be motivated. Just the fact of challenge.
Yeah, definitely. I think finding that challenge point is, again, a big part of the skill and the art of coaching. It's too far, and You know, you lose some players because it's too difficult and they disengage and it's not realistic, but too easy, and you never quite get them into that place. So we talked a bit recently about finding that tension, whereby if you're doing a session whereby you have opposition, you have attackers and defenders. Well, the defenders need to believe that they can be successful and that this feels like this is a real situation, quite similar to a game. And like they can see the relevance to a game, but also in the design, we could win this. We could win this if we can just in this key moment, we can win this game. And the attack is the same thing. Like it's not too easy. It's finding that tension between the two becomes really important. And I mean, it doesn't have to be that every training session's like that for various reasons. There are other things that you might want to do, but I always find those are the most fun sessions to be involved in, I think, as a player and as a coach.
And I think it goes alone. Like, and it might be simple. Me as a paddle coach, I can order to do one exercise, maybe about volleys and deep. But if you just change that and you just say the first one who makes more than an exact number, and just this fact, and it's the same drill, but just the fact of challenge. Oh, this goes a bit out of my zone that I control, so I have to do more. Just that thing, it changes.
Yeah,
completely.
I mean, I think it's making it a game, right? And the reason that one of the big reasons that anyone has come to a training session is because there is a game at some point. It's tied to a sport. It's tied to a game. So having it feel like it's a game is very important.
James, I have to tell you that one of the sentences you wrote that made me think much more, it was the one that says, we live in a society that is not focused on education. It is focused on competition. Mm. And I think you have made a lot of research, thinking a lot about how this society, this not humanized form of capitalism, is influencing how we live, how we play, everything. So how do you see a little bit this current war nowadays is affecting the kids playing, the development, and so on?
There's a really lovely YouTube video that's called Alike, so Alike, and it's actually it's from Marty. It's from your part of the world originally. I'm not exactly sure whether it's Spain, Portugal, Catalonia. I'm not 100% sure. But for me, that kind of captures the essence. There's no words. It's just it's an animation with some music, and they really are able to capture the emotions and what it feels like. So I highly recommend people go and check that out. I mean, I think the emphasis that is placed on competition between individuals is I suppose there's lots of words that come into mind, and I'm trying to think of the one that's most appropriate, but like kind of destructive in some ways is probably one of the words that comes to mind. It might be one of the more extreme words, but and I think it's almost like it's a misinterpretation of it comes back to wanting to play games as well. So and I think this comes back to black and white thinking. Games at the heart, a game is a competition. You're going to have a winner and a loser. But before that, when you scratch underneath the surface, a game is really a collaboration. It's an agreement to come together and do something together. So you say to me, James, do you want to play chess? Nah, I don't want to play chess. Okay, no game, no nothing. There's no cooperation. We don't get to play. Whereas, you go, James, do you want to, I don't know, you want to play some basketball? Yeah, I do. So we agree that we're going to do something together first. So at the basis of all competition, there should be collaboration, a foundation of we're coming together to do something together. And I think in society, in Western thinking, Northern European in particular thinking being very black and white, and the era of neoliberalism and the focus on market forces and corporate capitalism and all these things, we have allowed the world and our societies to shift in a direction whereby competition between people is emphasized and collaboration between people is overshadowed. And I have an example. Again, it comes from my dad, and it comes from Liverpool. So he explained to me when he was a kid, maybe like 12 years old, that if him and his friends wanted to play football, there was no leagues. There was nothing on a weekend. So they had like school football, but school football would be during the week, like maybe in the evenings. So if they wanted to play on the weekend, they would agree like, okay, we'll all meet at this park at this time and let's all go and be there. So maybe there's 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 of them, I don't know, however many. And they would go there and they would play, right? But if they wanted to play like a game as a team, they had to like call or go and visit friends from different schools and say, can you bring your friends and we'll meet here and we'll play a game. So sometimes they'd be waiting there on a Saturday for people to turn up and no one would turn up. And they'd be like, oh, okay, that's okay. We play amongst ourselves, but it would have been nice to play against another team. And then when they do turn up, the opposition are there. Obviously, the overriding feeling is like joy and gratitude and like, oh, thank you for coming. It's great that you've turned up because now we can do this thing together. We can play this game. And when we play it, we're going to compete like hell. But the foundation is thank you for coming. Now we're here and we can play. Whereas the sport that I see today has lost that almost completely, especially youth sport. If the team doesn't turn up, oh, that's fine. We just get 3 points.
Yeah.
The team that the opposition team turns up, like you're lucky if the coaches shake hands, let alone say thank you for coming or get to know each other. The parents are on the opposite side of the pitch, like scowling at each other. So I think sport exemplifies that, but that idea can unfortunately infiltrate all sorts of areas of life, including education, school systems, and workplaces.
Now it just came to my mind. I just posted yesterday a video of Pablo Aimar, which was saying, no, like as nowadays kids doesn't play or whatever, coaches needs to create much more free situations in the training. When, in my opinion, this is completely an indirect criticism to society and coaches. Like saying before, kids were able to play in parks, to self-organize. Now, because society, capitalism, everything changes, they are not doing now anymore. And now is when we see the coaches, oh, we have been killing all this creativity. And now we are in a hurry to change, no? Also, I think one example that it might be clear to people that I went, thanks to your articles, was, for example, if you compare NBA and the EuroLeague basketball. Okay. In Europe, the kind of play is much more collective, high pressure in defense, collaboration in offense. In United States, when you have clearly maybe the full expression of capitalism, is a game based on just money, selling tickets, and in which the game style is fully focused on individualism. Like, I think this is also a clear example.
Yeah, it's a very good example. And I think what is beautiful with that is as well that you can't get away from sport being about collaboration. So there will always be moments whereby that recognition dawns on people, even in the NBA playing in that. I'm thinking of the Last Dance with the Bulls and the moment whereby they win when they can't get the ball to Jordan, or Jordan offloads the ball to Steve Kerr, and then he finishes it, like, you know. And it's in those moments, you know, everyone realizes what the team is super. You know, you need the team, obviously, but your point still stands that you can have a team that is designed around an individual and pushing that individual and helping that individual, or you can have a team that is more designed around helping everyone flourish within that. Yeah, it's a very good point. Very interesting.
And when I start reading about you, this how this corporate capitalism affected, it happened a little bit the same like with the culture. You say that's not possible. But then it happened to me a very funny anecdote that long time ago, one of my friends that it has also a complex approach to cyclism tell me, Marty, it's called Manuel Sola, told me, Marty, it's impressive how much people is, for example, changing the diet, the exercise, taking, for example, food or drinks that in the short term they boost the performance, but in the long term is the worst thing you can do for the body. So then I get into your papers, and then I wrote him, hey, I said, hey, Manu, I recommend you, and by the way, I recommend you to all of our listeners to check James Vaughan papers and articles, because I think what you explain about that we only value now the extrinsical, the society is more dehumanized than ever, only the winners matter. So it also influences this thing, no?
Yeah, I think you have another example, a good example here in Stockholm as well, is that if you want to play football as an adult, then you need to be willing to play at like 9:30 at night, 10 o'clock at night. Unless you're the elite, and then you get paid to be a professional and you can play whenever you want. Like it's another example of like how,
like there is the fun or just the enjoyment doesn't count anymore if you are not profitable in money terms.
Exactly. It's like unless you can be the best of the best of the best, we're not going to provide you the opportunities to do this thing. And if we do provide the opportunities, it's extremely insociable hours that's going to like put a lot of strain and tension on the rest of your life. So I mean, it's very interesting considering where sport has been, how it started from communities coming together, collaborating, playing games that they love to do, to where it is now, which is extremely elitist in many places. And the elitism is trickling down to the grassroots and polluting that environment in many ways. So it's not the happiest way to end the conversation here, Marty. But,
so I could ask you then, James, that I think that now we are in the beginning of the movie of all of this complexity science, ecological dynamics. And I think for many of us, it was also for me, can be a little bit surprising listening to talk about all these issues. So what would you recommend, or which are the documents, papers, books that have had more impact on you, and you think also that it can help on other ones?
Yeah, okay. It's probably less about documents as much as it's more about people. So I must admit, before I met my wife, who's always been studying sustainability science and kind of industrial ecology and things like that. Before that, my worldview was pretty traditional. So she kind of introduced me to systems thinking, and kind of at that point in time, I was moving from my master's to my PhD, and I had the opportunity to sit down and meet Keith Davids in Byron Bay. And then started to read more about ecological approaches. But to be fair, I'd come across the importance of the environment in papers and in theses around psychology from Cliff Mallet, my supervisor at UQ. And then, I met Dennis Hortin and Marco Sullivan here in Stockholm when I was visiting.
I definitely I recommend the videos I go, but papers also. I think it's colleague of yours, Marco Sullivan. It's also very interesting with all the topics we have discussing about.
Yeah, definitely. And then I think if you want to get into more around like the bigger societal kind of, or yeah, the societal ripple effects than the guys at My Fastest Mile. So you have Mark Upton, you got Al Smith and John O'Byrne, who spent many hours talking to them throughout my PhD, and they were extremely kind in having these type of conversations. So it's less about, I suppose, books and more about people. So I would recommend checking out what those people are up to. Yeah.
Here, me personally, if somebody's interested and to see a little bit the link of cultures and how we are, I would recommend, I discovered thanks to Ali, one of the subscribers of Fosbury Flop, and it was Rule Breakers, Rule Makers.
Yeah,
that it explains a little bit how emerge social norms, and reading that book, I promise I couldn't stop linking with lessons I took from you.
The other one as well, which is nothing to do really with that. Well, it is kind of an academic book, but The Dawn of Everything is something that I'm working my way through slowly. But it's essentially like a view of kind of ancient history and anthropology that is counter to traditional views of like more of a B C D linear progression of society and civilization, and recognizing that that was non-linear as well, and what that means politically today, and what it means in terms of what we value today, and where those values really came from. And it's actually really relevant to the Catalan culture as well. They talk about where the value of equality comes from, and that at least in the book's argument, equality was something that never really existed in Europe, but it did exist in America. So, like the colonization of America, and I suppose going to the New World and meeting the indigenous populations there. That is where discussions about equality actually emerged and came from. So even kind of recognizing that kind of shines a whole new light on the type of societies we have today, and where democracy really comes from, and those type of things, and seeing the past differently, I think there is potential there to see a new way forward as well.
I will check it, and I will put all of them in the notes of the episode so everybody can check.
Fantastic.
James, it has been a very big pleasure, and I am really grateful that I could share this time with you. But above all, I promise that I'm even more grateful for all the, I think it's positive influence you have had of in my way of thinking, and also in the coaching style. It's true that maybe we have finished a little bit sadly. So you are invited whenever you want to come back, and we can remember together good times in Barcelona, talk about Pep Guardiola, Messi, Cruyff, and many questions I have written here that I would love to discuss with you. Thank you very much.
But it's good that you have more, and thank you. It was really nice to talk to you. It's really nice to go over the Catalan culture and what relates to FC Barcelona and that stuff again. It's been a while. So thank you, Marty.
I send you a big hug from Catalonia. Bye, James.
Bye.